Among the stars that flickered in the endless black of space, diplomatic relations between Earth's people, the Terrans, and the various alien civilizations had grown complex over the past 3 centuries. The Terrans had joined the Galactic Union and now maintained several space stations and diplomatic vessels across the galaxy. One such vessel, the USS Enterprise 7, commanded by the promising young Commander Stephen Reg, found itself host to an unusual diplomatic meeting. The Verdani, a sophisticated species known for their advanced biology and somewhat arrogant attitude toward other species, had arrived earlier than expected. Their delegation, led by the stern counselor therein, had already made their disdain for humanity's primitive customs quite clear during preliminary discussions. As Stephen stood on the bridge reviewing the latest reports, his second-in-command, Commander Jackson, approached with concern etched on his face. "Sir, the Verdani delegation has requested an immediate audience. They claim they've brought a diplomatic gift." Stephen's brow furrowed. Verdani gifts were rarely straightforward. "Very well. Have them escorted to Conference Room Alpha. I'll meet them there." Minutes later, Stephen found himself face-to-face with Counselor Theron, whose bluish-gray skin seemed to shimmer under the artificial lighting. Behind the counselor stood several other Verdani officials, and among them, a striking female figure draped in elegant robes. "Commander Reg," Theron began, his voice dripping with condescension, "we have brought you a token of our appreciation for your people's attempts at diplomacy. We present to you the Lady Laney, who shall serve as your bride in the traditional Verdani manner of sealing agreements." The words hung in the air like an executioner's axe. Stephen felt his jaw clench as he recognized the insult. To the Verdani, marriage across species was impossible due to biological incompatibility. This was clearly a joke at humanity's expense, designed to either humiliate him or force him to reject their gift and strain diplomatic relations further. Laney stepped forward, her elongated features and large, intelligent eyes meeting Stephen's gaze. She moved with a grace that suggested years of formal training. Yet there was something in her expression, something that spoke of reluctance, perhaps even sympathy. "I accept," Stephen said, the words coming out before he could fully consider their implications. The Verdani counselors exchanged glances, clearly surprised by his response. "However, I request time to prepare appropriate accommodations for Lady Laney and to discuss the specifics of this arrangement." Theron's lips curled into what might have been amusement. "Of course, Commander. Take all the time you need. I'm sure this will be educational for both your peoples." As the Verdani delegation departed, leaving Laney behind, Stephen found himself alone with his new bride. Up close, he could see the subtle patterns in her skin that shifted like oil on water, and the way her long, silver-white hair seemed to float around her face as if gravity had less hold on it. "I apologize for this situation," Laney said softly, her voice carrying a melodic quality. "I know this was not your choice." "It wasn't yours either, I'm guessing," Stephen replied, gesturing for her to follow him to his office. "Let's discuss what this really means, shall we?" In the privacy of his quarters, Laney revealed her true purpose. "I am not merely a political pawn, Commander. I am a xenoanthropologist specializing in interspecies cultural studies. When the council decided on this I volunteered. I wanted to understand humans better, to see beyond the prejudices my people hold." Stephen listened intently as Laney explained the Verdani belief in their genetic superiority and their certainty that cross-species reproduction was impossible. "We have what you might call adaptive genes," she explained. "They allow us to survive in various environments. But the Council believes they cannot bridge the gap between our species and others." "What do you believe?" Stephen asked, finding himself genuinely curious about this thoughtful alien now sharing his space. "I believe science should question assumptions, not reinforce them," Laney replied. "But I'm bound by duty to return to Verdani space after this. Experiment concludes." Over the following weeks, an unexpected rhythm developed aboard the Enterprise 7. Laney spent her days studying human customs and culture, while Stephen attempted to navigate the political minefield her presence created. Some of his crew members viewed her with suspicion, others with curiosity, but most quickly grew accustomed to seeing the elegant Verdani in their midst. Dr. Peters, the ship's chief medical officer, became particularly interested in Laney's physiology. The Verdani understanding of genetics far exceeds our own in many ways, he confided to Stephen. One evening, if Lady Laney would consent to some tests, we might learn much that could benefit both our species. Laney agreed readily, her scientific curiosity matching the doctor's. Lieutenant Chadwick, the ship's xenobiologist, joined a research effort, and together they began documenting the similarities and differences between Verdani and human biology. As months passed, Stephen found himself drawn to Laney beyond mere diplomatic obligation. Their conversations ranged from philosophy to biology, from poetry to military strategy. She possessed a quick wit that matched his own, and a laugh that seemed to brighten the sterile corridors of the ship. "Your people fear touch," Laney observed one evening as they shared a meal in his quarters. "You shake hands, embrace, kiss, all things forbidden in formal Verdani society. We believe physical contact should be reserved for the most intimate of moments." "Cultural differences," Stephen replied, acutely aware of how close they were sitting. "Is that why you flinch when someone moves too near?" "I no longer flinch," she said quietly. "I have adapted." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, recognition of a connection that transcended mere diplomatic necessity. Meanwhile, the Verdani delegation maintained regular contact, Counselor Theron clearly expecting reports of cultural mishaps and incompatibility. Each time, Stephen and Laney presented a united front of mutual respect and growing understanding. "The humans are not as primitive as we assumed," Laney reported honestly. "Their capacity for adaptation and innovation rivals our own in many ways." Such statements border on heresy, Theron warned. "Remember your place, Lady Laney." But Laney was discovering that her place might be somewhere she'd never expected. For months into their arrangement, Laney began experiencing unusual symptoms: fatigue, nausea, and hormonal fluctuations that neither her Verdani physiology nor human medical knowledge could initially explain. Dr. Peters requested a comprehensive scan. The results made him call Stephen to the medical bay immediately. "Commander," he said, his voice shaking with excitement and disbelief, "Lady Laney is pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Stephen looked at Laney, who appeared as shocked as he felt. That should be impossible," he finally managed. "I know," Dr. Peters replied, "but the tests don't lie. She's carrying a child that is genetically half human, half Verdani." Laney's hand found Stephen's, her fingers intertwining with his. "This changes everything," she whispered. Indeed it did. Within days, word of the pregnancy reached Verdani space. Counselor Theron demanded immediate transport back to their homeworld, threatening to void all existing treaties. The Verdani Council viewed the pregnancy as an abomination, a threat to their genetic purity. "You will return immediately," Theron ordered Laney during a tense subspace communication. "This thing you carry will be terminated, and you will answer for your failure." Stephen stepped into the frame. "Lady Laney is under the protection of the Terran fleet. She carries not an abomination, but proof that our peoples can create rather than merely coexist. You dare threaten us, human? The Verdani will not tolerate this insult." The line went dead, leaving Stephen and Laney to contemplate the storm they'd unwittingly created. In the weeks that followed, tensions escalated across the sector. The Terran High Command struggled to balance diplomatic relations with a moral imperative of protecting one of their own, for Laney had, in every meaningful sense, become one of them. "I won't let them take you or our child," Stephen told her one night as they lay together, her hand resting on her still flat abdomen. "The Council will not back down easily," Laney warned. "They see this as a threat to everything they believe about Verdani superiority." "Then we need to change their perspective," Stephen replied. He calls for an emergency meeting of his senior staff. Commander Jackson, Dr. Peters, Lieutenant Chadwick, and his chief science officer, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, gathered in the conference room. On the table lay a proposal that could either save Lainey and their child or start a war. "We propose a scientific symposium," Dr. Peters explained. "We invite leading geneticists from multiple species, including respected Verdani scientists who might see the potential rather than the threat. We document the pregnancy, study it, publish our findings. Make it impossible to suppress," Lieutenant Chadwick added. "Turn Lainey and the child into symbols of scientific progress rather than political embarrassment. The risk," Jackson began, "is less than waiting for them to act first," Stephen finished. "Captain Morrison has agreed to host the symposium aboard the Starbase Meridian. We'll have 2 months to gather support before my command here could be compromised." The next weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Messages went out across the galaxy, carefully worded invitations to scientists and diplomats alike. To their surprise and relief, many accepted, including several prominent Verdani researchers who had long questioned their council's isolationist policies. Dr. Ilera, a renowned Verdani geneticist, arrived first. Her meeting with Lainey was private, but Stephen could see the excitement in both their expressions afterward. "She believes our child represents an evolutionary leap," Lainey told him. "She's prepared to argue that case before the council." As the symposium date approached, Lainey's pregnancy became more apparent. The child was developing differently than either pure human or Verdani offspring, but all medical scans showed it to be healthy and thriving. The symposium itself was a carefully orchestrated event broadcast across multiple systems. Experts presented data, theories, and possibilities. Lainey and Stephen spoke candidly about their relationship and its unexpected result. "Love," Lainey told the assembled crowd, "requires courage. The courage to see beyond what we think we know, to embrace what might be possible. Our child is not an accident or an abomination. They are hope made manifest." The presentation that truly turned the tide came from Dr. Peters and Dr. Ilera working together. They unveiled research showing that Verdani adaptive genes, long thought to be purely defensive, could actually facilitate interspecies genetic compatibility under specific circumstances. "Evolution doesn't always happen through gradual change," Dr. Ilera argued. "Sometimes it leaps forward when presented with unprecedented opportunities." Counselor Theron, who had attended the symposium with several other council members, stood to speak. The room fell silent. "The council has reconsidered our position," he announced, the words clearly costing him. "While we still have reservations, we cannot ignore the scientific evidence presented here. Lady Lainey will be permitted to carry the pregnancy to term, under condition of continued medical monitoring and study." The relief was palpable, but Theron wasn't finished. "Furthermore, we propose a collaborative research initiative between our peoples. If this child proves viable and healthy, it may open doors we never imagined possible." In the months that followed, tensions gradually eased. Lainey continued her pregnancy aboard the Enterprise 7, now accompanied by scientists from multiple species studying every aspect of the extraordinary development. The child, a daughter they named Sophie, meaning wisdom in human culture, was born without complications. She possessed the best features of both species, the adaptability and intellectual capacity of the Verdani combined with human resilience and emotional openness. At her birth, representatives from both peoples were present. Even Counselor Theron, now softened by scientific curiosity, held the infant with obvious wonder. "She has the Verdani eye pattern," he observed, "but the human bone structure in her face. Remarkable." 6 months later, in a private ceremony attended by their crew family and select diplomats from both worlds, Stephen and Lainey were married in a fusion of human and Verdani traditions. Sophie, now a healthy, alert infant who already showed signs of advanced development, was blessed by leaders of both peoples. The epilogue to their story came 5 years later. Sophie had grown into a bright, curious child who served as a living bridge between the Verdani and humanity. Her unique abilities, inherited equally from both parents, made her naturally gifted at understanding and mediating between different perspectives. Laney had established the first interspecies anthropological institute aboard Space Station Unity, studying how different species could better understand and work with each other. Stephen had been promoted to admiral, overseeing diplomatic operations in the sector. "Mommy," Sophie asked one day, playing with a model starship while her parents watched, "why did those people send you to Daddy as a joke?" Laney exchanged a smile with Stephen. "Because, my dear, they didn't understand that the universe often finds humor in bringing together exactly what needs to be together. Your father and I weren't meant to fall in love, but we did." The joke became joy. Sophie nodded solemnly, processing this in her precocious way. "So, I'm the best joke ever?" Stephen laughed, scooping her up in his arms while Laney joined them in a family embrace. "No, sweetheart, you're the best surprise ever. And you showed everyone that love doesn't follow the rules we think it does." Outside their quarters, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that in one small corner of the galaxy, two species had found common ground not through treaties or trade, but through the simple act of two hearts recognizing each other. Back on Verdani Prime, children now grew up learning about the Human-Verdani alliance, born from what had been intended as mockery, but blossomed into understanding. Diplomatic jokes were discouraged, but diplomatic marriages, once proper protocols and genetic compatibility were confirmed, became an accepted practice. The Verdani Council, in one of their rare official comedic moments, erected a statue at their diplomatic academy. It depicted a bride and groom of different species with the inscription, "What begins in jest may end in love, and what seems impossible may merely await discovery." Counselor Theron, now retired and writing his memoirs, included a chapter titled, "The Joke That Taught Me Humility." In it, he wrote, "I learned that day that evolution waits for no one's permission, and love needs no one's approval. The universe, it seems, has the last laugh on all our certainties." And so the story of the alien bride sent as a joke became legend throughout the galaxy, not as a cautionary tale, but as one of hope. It reminded all who heard it that barriers between peoples are often built on assumptions, and those assumptions can crumble in the face of open hearts and minds. Laney and Stephen's marriage flourished, producing two more children in the following years. A son who inherited his father's tactical genius and his mother's scientific aptitude, and another daughter who showed signs of being able to understand multiple alien languages instinctively. The research into Verdani adaptive genetics revolutionized medical science across multiple species. Genetic counseling for interspecies relationships became a respected field of study. What had once seemed impossible became merely unusual, then eventually just another form of diversity in a galaxy full of wonders. On their 15th wedding anniversary, as they watched Sophie, now a teenager showing remarkable leadership qualities, captain her school's championship debate team to victory, Stephen pulled Laney close. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd both played our parts as expected?" he asked. Laney leaned into him, watching their eldest daughter argue passionately for interspecies cooperation in stellar mining operations. "I think the universe would have found another way to bring us together. Some connections are inevitable, even across the stars, especially across the stars." Their daughter won the debate, to no one's surprise. As she raised her trophy, a gesture adopted from human culture but now used throughout the galactic debate circuit, the audience cheered in multiple languages. Verdani, human, and several other species represented among both competitors and spectators. Later that evening, Counselor Theron, now Ambassador Theron and a family friend, joined them for dinner. The old Verdani had aged gracefully, his once stern features now frequently creased with smile lines. "I have news from the council," he announced as they shared traditional foods from both worlds. "They've finally agreed to your proposal for a permanent interspecies academy. It will be built at the edge of the neutral zone, accessible to all member species of the Union." Laney's eyes lit up. "The knowledge exchange program? Everything you proposed, my dear. Your vision of cultural understanding as the foundation for lasting peace. The Council now sees what I failed to see all those years ago, that diversity strengthens, not weakens." Later, As their guests departed and their children slept, Stephen and Lainey stood on the observation deck of their new station, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. The blue marble that had given humanity to the stars now shared its orbit with ships from a dozen different worlds. You know, Stephen mused, I sometimes think about that moment when you were first presented to me as a diplomatic gift. I can still picture Theron's face when I accepted. Lainey chuckled. Which face? The one trying to hide surprise? Or the one trying to hide pleasure at the prospect of human embarrassment? Both. But I wonder, did any of them suspect how it would really turn out? No more than we did. She leaned against him, watching a Verdani vessel dock with the station. But isn't that the beauty of it? We went into it blind, driven by duty and curiosity, and found something neither of our peoples had imagined possible. Love at first sight, love at first acceptance, perhaps. You saw me as a person, not just a political tool. That was the real beginning. Their youngest child, barely 2 years old, appeared at the doorway, having escaped his nanny's watchful eye. His hair was dark like his father's, but his eyes held the characteristic Verdani shift in color when emotions ran high. Right now, they glowed with the blue-green of contentment as he toddled toward his parents. Stephen lifted him easily. Can't sleep, buddy. The child babbled in what sounded like a mix of Verdani and human languages, or maybe something entirely new. Scientists were still studying how the hybrid children were developing their own unique form of communication. Perhaps, Lainey suggested softly, we should tell him a story about how his parents met. The one about the diplomatic joke? The very same. As they settled in the family area of their quarters, other family members eventually drifted in. Sophie appeared with her guitar, another human cultural adoption that had spread throughout their extended family. Her younger brother brought his collection of starship models. Soon, they were all gathered together, a family that shouldn't have been possible according to the science of just 2 decades ago. Stephen began the tale. Once upon a time, in a galaxy full of different peoples who thought they knew everything about each other, there was a great mistake that turned into the greatest fortune. And as he spoke, weaving the story of how their family came to be, Lainey watched their children's faces light up with wonder at the tale they'd heard before but never tired of hearing again. The story of how love found a way across the stars, how science expanded to embrace the impossible, and how a joke became the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. Outside their windows, ships from multiple worlds came and went, crews that now often included mixed species. Other families like theirs had followed, creating a tapestry of connection that would have seemed fantastic mere years ago. The universe, as Counselor Theron had once said, did indeed have the last laugh. But it was a laugh of joy, not mockery, a cosmic chuckle at how cleverly it had woven together what seemed separate, how it had built bridges from what were meant to be walls. And in the heart of it all was a family. 2 beings from different worlds who had found their world in each other, and the children who proved that the universe's best jokes were the ones that ended in love.